trustees, and they told me I'd have to bring a truck because they'd have to print it all out. It's ridiculous. So yeah, they need help. They need funding.
Any other questions? Representative Mayfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hutchinson, you mentioned annual cost of underage drinking specifically, of $1.3 billion? So someone's collecting some data somewhere to come up with that figure. Do you have this, and can I get it?
Yes, that's from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention out of Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Thank you. Additional questions for Mrs. Hutchinson? Seeing none, thank you. Next, we have Mr. John Snyder. There are traps like that all over this building.
I never saw that chair there. So, hello, good morning. My name is John Cinder. I am one of the owners of Crown Liquors. We're located in central Indiana. I'm also chairman of the Indiana Association of Beverage Retailers. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, it's my privilege and honor to testify. Simply stated, our industry, our association, my business, we now stand for members of the committee support of Sunday sales. Honor to simply stated, as a community-based, responsible retailer association, we are first obligated to our customers in the neighborhood, support of Sunday sales. Simply stated, as community-based, responsible indicated they like to see sales. We are first obligated for carry-out customers in the neighborhood, support of Sunday sales. Simply stated, as community-based, responsible indicated they like to see sales. We are first obligated for carry-out customers in the neighborhood.
Any questions for Mr. Cinder?
Simply stated,
Representative
Ellis. Responsible indicated they like to see sales. We are first obligated for carry-out customers.
Any questions for Mr. Cinder?
Representative
Ellis.
Responsible indicated they like. I don't think so, but I don't know that for sure.
John, you mentioned that you've been working on it since 2015. Is that correct?
Our trade association has, yes. In 2015, we were in favor of Sunday sales. That is right. We had a bill.
The bill that you were in favor in 2015, was it different than the bill we have in front of us today?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. As you may be aware, I had the very first committee hearing on Sunday sales a few years back, and your organization stood up in opposition to that bill. It's very similar to the bill that we have today. Why the turnaround from then to now?
Well, I don't like to use words like progressive. Oftentimes people think, or people say things change, but things do change. We have evolved on this issue. It's clear to us, it's clear to me personally. As I stated, we have seen and heard from our customers, there's been an increasing support for Sunday sales. The fact of the matter is, we are retailers, and retailers are a consumer-driven marketplace. And to the extent that we believe at this point people want it more than they did 3 years ago, and certainly more than 10 years ago, the timing is now right.
Do you still believe the statistics that were presented during the presentation of my bill that said that 25% of your retailers would go out of business if Sunday sales passed?
Okay, well, I've only been chairman for less than a year, and I believe that study, I remember hearing about the study. I haven't read the study, so I don't know the methodology. I do know that for years, it is true that members of our association have testified that allowing for Sunday sales would have a negative financial impact on package stores and even cause some stores to close. So to the extent that Sunday sales becomes law, I think some stores will close, and unfortunately that is an unavoidable and disappointing reality. But clearly, as chairman of the association, I can't comment on the specific finances of any single package store or even a group of stores, but I think it's reasonable to expect that some members will close, particularly those members that are, that don't have sufficient volume to withstand the extra costs incurred with operating on the seventh day.
Thank you. I appreciate you finally seeing the light.
So, well, thank you.
Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cinder.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Ron Breimeyer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ron Breimeyer with Legis Group Public Affairs. I'm here representing the Indiana Licensed Beverage Association, which are the mom and pop bars and taverns in the state of Indiana. And we appreciate the fact that under the restaurant permit, as I look at the bill, those with the carryout privileges will be included for carryout on Sunday. And we appreciate that, and we support this bill.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Breimeyer? None? We're going to set a record here if we don't start asking questions and eat some time. Next, we have Mr. Grant Monahan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Grant Monahan. I'm president of the Indiana Retail Council. I'm very pleased to be here this morning in strong support for the passage of House Bill 1051 and thank the chairman for the authorship of the bill. As Eric mentioned earlier, Sunday is the second busiest shopping day of the week. Time-starved Hoosiers who are doing their grocery shopping on Sunday want the ability to purchase all of their groceries at one time, at one place. And that may include a case of beer or a bottle of wine. This bill will give them the opportunity to do that. I represent very responsible retailers who take the law seriously, who have implemented, again, as Eric mentioned, a wide variety of security measures that are active in their stores today. And we don't see any difference between the activities that take place in our member stores 6 days a week versus the seventh. The seventh would be treated just the same. And so we support the passage of this legislation, and thank you very much. If for Hoosiers who live near the border, they often will cross the border and purchase alcoholic beverages on Sunday in neighboring states that permit Sunday sales, which is all the states that surround Indiana. It's estimated that Indiana is losing at least $12 million a year in lost sales tax and alcoholic beverage excise tax revenues because of that shopping taking place in a neighboring state. And when those people do that, they're not just buying a case of beer and then coming home. They're taking their entire shopping list with them. And so there's a great deal of retail activity that's being lost in Indiana, particularly, again, in border communities because of Hoosiers' inability to purchase on Sunday. Again, thank you for your support for this legislation. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your authorship. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Monahan. Representative Giacquina.
Mr. Chairman, Grant, did you comment, or you may have, on the hours of noon to 8?
We're very comfortable with the hours of noon to 8, yes.
Representative Eberhardt.
Grant, you and I have been partners on this issue for many years.
We have.
Can you talk about this unusual relationship you have now with the packaged liquor stores and how that came to be, and how we're now fighting for the same cause?
As you know, I've been around here for a long time. Certainly our members have been very active with the General Assembly for a long time. We appreciate the ebb and flow of the legislative process. We appreciate how times change and how legislative priorities may change over time. We felt and still feel today that the coming together with the liquor stores was the right thing to do for both sides. As you know, we've been battling liquor store owners literally for decades in this building. And I don't think I'm being naive when I say I think that this opportunity that we have now will put to rest so many other issues that we have fought over in the past. And I'd like to think, Mr. Chairman, that this could be the beginning of a new day where you don't have to deal with nearly as many alcoholic beverage issues, or if you do, they're not contentious.
Is that a promise?
It's a promise from the Retail Council, yes, sir.
Well, thanks for that intro here. Piggybacking upon that, do you see this as an agreement not to pursue cold beer sales? Are you still supportive of that issue as well, or do you think that, you know?
The agreement is that we would oppose the expansion of cold beer sales, and we stand by that.
But you were in supportive of cold beer sales before this newfound relationship with the liquor store, is that correct?
We have been in the past, yes, sir. But again, times change. The legislative landscape changes. The opportunity to work with the liquor stores owners on alcoholic beverage issues presented itself, and we are pleased to be a part of the coalition.
So if we have a cold beer bill before us, you're going to testify against it?
Yes.
Solely for the reason, not for your clients specifically, but just because of your relationship with liquor stores?
The Indiana Retail Council is made up of its members. It's not me. Our members supported the arrangement with the Liquor Stores Association, and our members support our legislative position.
Additional questions? Mr. Monahan, do you have the information of what the busiest hours for shopping are on Sunday?
I do not. That's a very good question. I don't know, and we'll do the best to find out from our membership.
If you do find that, would you share it with the committee?
Happy to. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Monahan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Rick Cockrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Rick Cochran with Capital Assets. We represent the Wine Institute, and we are in support of the legislation. We don't have a lot more to add. The Hoosiers that live on the border have the option. We think the rest of the state should have the option when they're at their local Kroger or other grocery stores or wherever. If they want to pick up a bottle of wine for dinner, that should be their option, and we're in support of 1051. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Cockrum? Seeing none, thank you. We have Mr. Greg Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Greg Ellis with the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, and alcohol is not one of our priority bills, but we think that it's an important enough issue that we should testify, and we developed some policy positions. The Chamber supports more logical and equitable policies that level the playing field for producers, distributors, retailers, as well as facilitate consumer convenience. We believe that includes Sunday sales and cold beer. We developed this through our Economic Development Policy Committee, which went to our Executive Committee and our Board of Directors. I'm going to be brief and leave the details to many of the members that are here, but if I can answer questions, I will.
Any questions for Mr. Ellis? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes everyone who has signed up to testify. Is there anyone else in the room from the public that would like to comment or testify on Sunday alcohol sales for carryout? Yes, sir. If you would, upon concluding your testimony, fill out a form and provide it to Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brian Burdick with Barnes and Thornburg, representing the Distilled Spirits Council. Appreciate all the work done this summer and the opportunity to have testified this summer and worked on this project. We rise in support of the bill, and like Rick Cockrum, that's the extent of my testimony. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Burdick. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to testify on Sunday sales? Seeing none, we'll close the public testimony. Is there any committee discussion? Representative Eberhardt.
Chairman Schmaltz, can you just briefly comment on how we came up with the 12 to 8 hours? I was not at the committee hearings during the summer, and how that particular part of the bill.
Sure, I can provide you with that report as well. I'll give you a couple of reasons. One, I believe that as we enter into an area that we have not been in for many, many decades, that it is important to enter in a way that I feel is responsible. So I looked at states across the country, and some states have no limitations, but many, many do. I can provide you with a list of states that surround us that have some sort of differentiation between a Sunday carryout and a normal Monday through Saturday carryout. 12 to 8 seems to be the most populous time for shoppers, although we're going to try and find out some more information on that. Sunday 12 to 8 is an 8-hour shift. So liquor stores that are coming in, for them to come in, it would allow them to operate under one shift. Now, if after a period of time we see that 12 to 8 is working quite swimmingly, then perhaps we could incrementally change that and expand it at that point if we find that there's no additional unforeseen social carnage from allowing a seventh day. I think that anybody that thinks we're going to go into this and it's all going to be happy times because we can buy carry-out alcohol on Sunday is making a mistake. I think anytime that you expand alcohol in any way, you're going to have some related issue from alcohol. It's a drug. It causes problems. People drive drunk. People do foolish things. They lose their senses. So for me, limiting it to 8 hours is a time frame that I'm comfortable with. Representative Houston.
Thank you, Chairman Schmaltz. For all those reasons, that's why I don't drink alcohol. But out of curiosity, if you had data that there was those times, I'm not overwhelmed by the 12 to 8. It's one shift argument, to be honest with you, because they can open their doors whenever they want, technically. So, but are you willing to, if there is data, to reconsider if that data would show that disproportionately or proportionately prior to noon? I'm completely in agreement with you. There's set hours. I don't think any of us would argue to go by 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. makes sense. But I am struck by the fact if you go in a grocery store in the morning, not at scene times in the morning, but 10 a.m. or after church or something like that, you'll see a good number of people. So it just strikes me as odd that we'd make somebody have to wait while they're out. So are you willing to see data?
I think that the data, if we saw data on shopping times, we'd need to see data on impact on society as well. I think those two go hand in hand. My main concern with opening up beyond 12 to 8 is whenever you expand alcohol sales, you're going to have problems. So I don't know that we'd be able to just say the most popular time to shop is 9 a.m. on a Sunday, which, I mean, I can't imagine anybody'd want to be anywhere at 9 a.m. on a Sunday other than church or at home with their cats. But if you can show that somebody is, that it's safer, and I think we'd have a very hard time doing that without any data. I think when we create the Sunday carryout law, we're going to start creating data on what happens and what we see in society. So I'd be uncomfortable with changing that, but I am curious as to what the most popular time is to shop.
And one follow-up question.
Sure.
I don't know the answer to this question. For the other folks, like the wine industry that have sold on Sunday, is there a hour restriction to them?
I didn't hear your question. Could you say that again?
The folks that have been able, the wine industry that have been able to sell on Sunday, is there
We're
an
not,
hour?
we're not changing.
There's no hours restrictions on them?
They have had Sunday carryout sales rights going back, I think, to 2012 or 13, and I think that we're going to leave them where they're at.
Right, but I mean, today in current code, there is no hour restriction, or is there?
I believe there's an hour restriction, it's just not 12 to 8.
Okay.
Additional questions? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There seems to be a kumbaya with the persons that testified today. I'm interested in knowing what's happening over in the House of Lords. Are they passing a similar bill, and is there some kind of agreement that we will come to an agreement on this?
I'm not sure I can look into that crystal ball and give you a fair answer, but what I can tell you is the language that is before you today came directly from the commission work this past summer verbatim. And the chairman of the Senate Public Policy Committee was the primary author of that.
Does that indicate that the two of you have agreed on this?
I think the commission agreed. As you'll see, the alcohol legislation that I've proposed, the theme is, what did the commission approve? I think the Alcohol Commission this summer worked very hard to try to come to some reasonable places on legislation. So I think it is not necessarily whether the House or the Senate has agreed on it. The Alcohol Commission did.
Mr. Eberhardt raised some interesting questions about cold beer sales and whether that's going to get entangled in this whole debate about Sunday sales. Has there been discussion between you and the House of Lords on this issue as well?
I can tell you that we've talked about Sunday. We talked about cold beer sales through the commission over the past summer and fall, and I'd be happy to provide you that report.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Representative Giacquina.
Just a quick comment. I was on the commission along with you, Representative Small. Ended up, and I'm not going to summarize what you just summarized, but you hit up on all the points that came when it came about talking about the hours of 12 to 8. Did a nice job there, and we all voted. The commission, not sure what the final vote total numbers were. Do you have that, or do you know what the either on this particular issue with the hours, and then I think was it unanimous vote at the end? I can't remember the vote totals specifically on the 12 to 8. Casey, do you remember what they were?
I have them. If you wouldn't mind for just a minute, I can look. My recollection is on the 12 to 8, it might have been 13 to 1. It was overwhelming, whatever it was. 16 to 1. 16 to 1 on 12 to 8 Sunday.
About on the final vote on the everything that we voted on at the end.
On the report, I think it was
report.
unanimous.
That was unanimous.
I'll make sure when I can look for sure, but I think it was unanimous.
Okay, thanks.
Additional questions? Comments? If there are none, a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.